Good evening. Tonight we go deep into a story. It will test what you believe about medicine and right and wrong. It is about the fine line between saving lives and losing them. This is not just a story about drug dealers or users. Those people are in it too. But our story starts somewhere unexpected. It starts with doctors and nurses, in clean hospital halls, and in the good hearts of people who thought they were helping. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Only if you like exploring history's dark places. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and why you like these stories. Now, get comfortable, turn the lights down and get ready. What you will hear is the life story of a molecule. This molecule has saved more people than almost anything in history, and it has ruined just as many lives. This is the full story of morphine. Long before morphine had a name, before people even knew how to take one pure thing from a plant, there was sleep. Not normal nighttime sleep, but a deeper sleep. A sleep you could call for. A sleep with no pain. The secret to this sleep came from the ground. Imagine the Fertile Crescent for 1,000 years before Christ. The land between two rivers where people first farmed and built cities. Where civilization itself began. Here among the wheat and barley grew another plant. Top of East on the firm, the opium poppy. It grows about 3 feet tall. Its stem is a pale green with a hint of blue. The flower on top is a natural wonder, as delicate as tissue paper. Its color can be pure white or a deep purple. But the flower, pretty as it is, was not what people wanted. When the petals drop, they show the real prize. A pod. A round seed head about the size of a small egg. The ancient Sumerians, the first farmers and writers, found something amazing. If you lightly cut the skin of this pod, just enough to break the surface but not reach the seeds, something magical happens. A white milky liquid seeps from the cut. Left in the air, this sap turns dark and sticky. It becomes a brown gum. This was raw opium. The Sumerians called the poppy whole gill. This means joy plant. This was not just a cute name. It described exactly what they found. A plant that could give pure joy, or at least the closest thing to it, freedom from pain. They collected the gum, pressed it into cakes and used it as medicine. For bad coughs, for fevers that would not go away, for the terrible pain of injuries or sickness, and most of all for sleep when sleep would not come. This knowledge was too good to stay in one place. Like anything valuable, it traveled. The opium trade route across the ancient world. Merchants and soldiers, priests and doctors carried it. It went south and west to Egypt, though it became part of both medicine and religion. The Ebers Papers, one of the oldest medical texts from around 1550 BC, has hundreds of cures, and opium is in many of them. It was given to crying children for stomach problems, for wounds, and for sicknesses with no other cure. The Egyptians respected opium so much they put it in tomb, a supply for the trip to the afterlife. Digs at royal tombs have found clay pots. Chemical tests show opium residue was inside. Even in death, the pharaohs wanted the comfort of the joy plant. The Phoenicians, great sailors and traders of the ancient world, brought opium to Greece. In Greece, the home of classical thinking, opium got a new layer. The Greeks did not just use it, they gave it myths. They linked the poppy to their gods of sleep and dream. Hypnos, the god of sleep, was often shown holding poppies. His son Morpheus, the god of dreams, could look like any person. He was said to touch sleeping people with a poppy branch to give them dreams. But the Greeks saw the danger too. They connected the poppy to Thanatos, the god of death. They knew the line between healing sleep and forever sleep was very thin. The amount that helped was almost the same as the amount that killed. Their doctors knew this. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, lived in the 5th century BC. Doctors still swear his oath today. He was a practical man. He refused magical reasons for sickness common in his time, but he did not refuse opium. He wrote about its use many times, calling it mek onion, from the word for poppy juice. He gave it for deep pain, for plagues, and for long-term sickness. He saw it as a strong tool, but a tool that needed knowledge and care. When Rome rose to power, opium was likely the top drug in the ancient world. Roman soldiers marched with it. Army doctors took it everywhere the empire grew. In the crowded city of Rome, opium was sold in markets next to food. It was as common as wine and for many just as needed. The top medical voice of Rome was Galen of Pergamum. He was the personal doctor to Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Galen wrote a huge amount and his ideas ruled medicine for 1500 years. He strongly supported opium, calling it the best cure-all. He put it in his famous mix called the reshaped, a complex blend of many ingredients, thought to cure almost anything. Galen's recipe had opium and snake flesh and many herbs. It was mixed with honey and aged like good wine. It was the top medicine of its day and opium was its powerful heart. Galen's writings were saved, copied and studied all through the Middle Ages, through Rome's fall, through the rise of Christianity and Islam, through the Dark Ages and into the Renaissance. His words had the weight of ancient knowledge. Wherever his text went, the knowledge of using opium went to. Arab doctors of the Islamic Golden Age added to this knowledge. They made opium preparation better, tried different ways to take it, and spread its use from Spain to Persia to India, for over 5,000 years from the Sumerians to the Renaissance. Opium was humanity's best reply to pain. It was our oldest friend in suffering, our steady partner in sickness and hurt. But it was also rough, unpredictable and risky. Opium's strength changed a lot based on where it grew and picked and how made. A dose that helped one day could kill the next. A doctor giving opium was as much a gambler as a healer. The world needed something better, something pure, something reliable, something you could measure and control. The world needed not plant juice, but the soul of that juice taken out alone and perfected. In the early 1800s, in a small German town, a young man was about to do this. The year was 1804. Napoleon Bonaparte just made himself Emperor of France. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the young United States. The Industrial Revolution was turning England into the world's factory. And in a simple pharmacy in Paderborn, Westphalia, a young assistant named Friedrich Wilhelmus C. R. Turner was about to change history. C. R. Turner was not yet 21. He had no college degree, no important friends, no rich supporter. He was just a helper in a small-town pharmacy, the son of an engineer with endless curiosity and a careful mind. He was fixated on a question that bothered doctors for ages: what in opium made it work? The common belief then was opium was one thing, that the brown gum itself was the active part. But C. R. Turner thought differently. He believed opium was a mix, a cocktail of different parts, and inside that mix was one special part that took away pain. If he could get it alone, if he could split this pure active part from everything else in raw opium, he would have something new, a medicine with known steady strength. Night after night, when the shop closed and Paderborn went quiet, C. R. Turner worked in the pharmacy's back room. He had no fancy gear, just basic early chemistry tools. Glass beakers, clay bowls, a small alcohol burner. His method was try and error, guided by new chemistry ideas. He started with raw opium, the sticky brown gum. He dissolved it in hot water, making a dark, bitter liquid. Then he added ammonia, strong alkaline solution. Something amazing happened. A grayish-white stuff began to fall out of the liquid, forming tiny crystals that sank to the bottom. He had separated something from the opium. But what was it? He collected the crystals, dried them, and looked with growing excitement. They were like nothing he had seen. They tasted bitter and had a strange, sharp smell. Most key when he dissolved a little in water and gave it to stray dogs near the pharmacy. The effect was clear. The animals fell into a deep, heavy sleep. They could be shaken, poked, even lifted, and barely react. After hours they would wake seeming fine but dizzy. C. R. Turner believed he had found it, but science even early needs proof. He needed to test his find on someone who could say how it felt. He needed a human volunteer. So in an act seen today as brave and very foolish, he turned to the only easy volunteers, himself and 3 friends. One winter evening in 1805, C. R. Turner gathered 3 young men, all in their 20s, in the pharmacy's back room. He carefully measured a dose of his crystals free. half a grain, about 30 milligrams. They dissolved the bitter powder in water and drank. Then they waited. For the first 30 minutes nothing happened. S.E.R. Turner, unsure if the dose was enough, made a choice. He doubled it. Each took another 4 grains, 60 milligrams total. This time the effects came like a wave. Warmth spread through their bodies. Their limbs got heavy, almost unmovable. Their thoughts grew slow and dreamy. They felt happy, peaceful, totally free from worry. It was a blissful, floating feeling. But S.E.R. Turner, in his science excitement, was not content. He wanted to know the limits, to map this new thing's power. He gave a third dose. This was wrong. The room began to spin. Nausea took them. One friend fell down into a stupor so deep he could not be woken. His breathing got shallow and slow. His skin turned pale and clammy. S.E.R. Turner realized with cold horror he had poisoned his friend, that he might have killed him. In a desperate try to reverse it, he forced vinegar down his friend's throat to make him vomit. They emptied their stomachs, retching badly, bringing up bitter stuff with bile and blood. Slowly, painfully, they got better. All four lived through the night, but were sick and weak for days after. Despite the near disaster, the test worked in its main goal. S.E.R. Turner had shown the crystals he isolated were opium, active part concentrated and pure. He named his find Morphineum after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams. The name was poetic, fitting, and would become Morphine in English. He published his findings in a German science journal in 1805, but the paper was mostly ignored. He was an unknown helper in a small town, publishing in a minor journal. The science world did not notice. Not stopped, he kept working, improving his process, doing more tests and carefully writing results. It took 12 more years for his find to get the notice it deserved. In 1817, S.E.R. Turner published a bigger paper, and this time the science world looked. The French chemist Joseph Louis Gale, as a top scientist in Europe, S.E.R. Turner's work. He saw its importance at once. He presented it to the French Academy of Sciences, giving it his high prestige. Drug companies took notice. Merck, a German chemical and drug firm running since the late 17th century, started making morphine for sale in 1827. The effect on medicine was revolutionary. For the first time ever, doctors had a painkiller of exact, reliable strength. They could figure doses with confidence. A patient in London could get the same quality morphine as one in Vienna or New York. There was no guessing, no change from batch to batch. It was standard, scientific, modern. Morphine was also amazingly strong. It was about 10 times stronger than raw opium. A tiny bit could ease pain that needed a huge, sickening dose of opium to touch. For patients with cancer, bad injuries, the agony of final sickness, it was a revelation. It was mercy. It was a true miracle. Surgery changed. Before morphine, surgery was a nightmare. Patients were held down by strong men while the surgeon worked fast, racing against the clock of conscious pain. Amputations were done in minutes, not because it was best, but because it was all patients could take. Ether anesthesia in the 1840s let patients sleep through surgery, but they still woke to awful pain. Morphine was the answer. It made recovery after surgery bearable, even peaceful. Medical journals of the mid-1800s are full of shining reports. Doctors praise morphine as the greatest find in medical history. It was called a gift from God, a win for science, the final sign of human control over suffering. For a time all the praise seemed right. The miracle was real. But there was a problem, a flaw in this perfect creation. And that flaw would not be fully seen until morphine met another new invention. A device letting it go into the blood with new speed and power. The joining of morphine and the hypodermic needle would change all. It would make an epidemic. And that epidemic would be born on the battlefields of the American Civil War. The year is 1861. The United States, a nation just 80 years old, splits itself. The Civil War starts not with big plans or clear goals, but with confusion, anger, and a deep underestimate of the horror to come. Both sides thought it would end in months. They were wrong. It would last for years and take over 600,000 lives. More American deaths than World War I, World War II, Korea and Vietnam together. The Civil War's weapons were new. The rifle musket, the Springfield model 1861 Enfield rifle, fired a cone bullet called the mini-e-ball. And like round musket balls of past wars, the mini-e-ball was soft lead. It expanded when fired, gripping the rifle's grooves and spinning as it flew. This gave it terrible accuracy and range. A soldier could hit a target at 300 yards with good chance. But the tactics were old. Officers trained in Napoleonic style told men to advance in tight groups and straight lines. When these groups met the new rifles, the result was slaughter on factory scale. Battles like Antietam, Gettysburg and Cold Harbor made casualty lists that shocked both sides. The mini-e-ball did not make clean wounds. When it hit bone, it shattered it. When it hit soft tissue, it tumbled and dripped, making huge damage inside. Infection was almost sure. Germ theory was not known yet. Surgeons worked in blood-soaked coats they wore with pride. Thinking stains showed their skill. They used the same tools on patient after patient without cleaning, wiping them on dirty aprons. They did not wash their hands. The normal care for a bad limb wound was amputation. If bone was shattered or tissue to damage the limb came off. So field hospitals behind battle lines became slaughterhouses. Surgeons worked in tents full of screaming men. The floor slick with blood and piled with cut-off arms and legs like firewood. A good surgeon could take off a leg in under 10 minutes. They had to. Dozens more waited. And through all this, two tools made it barely survivable. Chloroform and morphine. Chloroform dripped on a cloth over the patient's face made them unconscious during surgery. They would wake to find themselves hurt, but at least they had not felt the saw-cutting bone. The pain that came after, though, the deep, grinding, constant pain of a cut-off limb, the harsh healing. That pain could not be wiped away so easy. For that there was morphine and a new way to give it. In the 1850s, the doctors working apart, Dr. Alexander Wood in Edinburgh and Dr. Charles Provost in Lyon, made a new device, the hypodermic syringe. It was simple, a hollow needle on a glass tube with a plunger. For the first time, medicine could go under the skin or into a vein, skipping the stomach fully. The effect was instant and much stronger than taking by mouth. The Union Army Medical Corps gave out morphine on a huge scale. They bought tons of raw opium and thousands of ounces of pure morphine sulfate. They gave hypodermic syringes to their surgeons. Soldiers got morphine pills to carry into battle. Medics moved through fields after fights with leather bags full of morphine solution and syringes, injecting the hurt where they lay. It saved lives. They kept soldiers from dying of shock. It let them survive the trip from battlefield to hospital. It gave them a chance to live long enough for wounds to heal. But when the war ended in 1865, when guns went quiet and survivors went home, and it brought something back. They came back with missing limbs, with terrible scars, with nightmares that never faded. And many came back with a deep, endless need for morphine. The condition got a name: soldier's disease or army disease. Medical journals started printing reports of veterans who could not work without daily morphine. They had been given the drug by army doctors, had taken it as told, and now found themselves slaves to it. When they tried to stop, they were hit by symptoms that scared them. Uncontrollable shakes, violent cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, a huge sense of doom. The only relief came from more morphine. Guesses vary, but historians think at least 45,000 soldiers, maybe many more, came back from the war hooked on morphine. These were not criminals. They were not moral failures, though society would soon call them that. They were men who served their country, who got medical care with a substance they doctors said was safe. They walked into a trap set not by evil, but by not knowing. Doctors of that time did not grasp physical need or addiction like we do now. They knew patients taking morphine often would feel bad if they stopped fast, but they blamed the return of the original pain, not the drug making a new bodily need. The idea that a medicine could change the brain's basic chemistry. making a state where the body needed the drug just to feel normal, was not yet part of medical thought. As the 19th century went on, the problem grew. It was not just veterans now. The rise of patent medicines, unregulated tonics and elixirs sold in shops and mail orders, meant morphine and opium were everywhere. Products like Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup sold to mothers for crying babies had morphine. Laudanum, a mix of opium and alcohol, was as common in middle-class homes as aspirin today. It was taken for headaches, for period pains, for sleeplessness, for worry. The normal morphine addict of the late 1800s was not a criminal in an alley. It was a middle-aged white woman, often from a good family, given morphine for some long-term sickness and finding she could not stop. Doctors started seeing patients who came not sick but desperate, begging for more morphine, getting angry and mean when told no. The medical field, which had cheered morphine as a miracle, now faced the hard truth. They had made an army of dependent patients. The search for an answer began. What was needed was a thing with all the pain power of morphine, but without addiction's curse. Medical researchers and drug firms started trying making new compounds, looking for the perfect painkiller. And in the 1890s, a German drug giant thought they found it. They called their new creation heroin, heroic in English heroin. But that's another story, one of more lies and tragedy. For now, morphine had shown its two faces. It was both savior and destroyer, healer and enslaver of art. It had lifted humanity above pain's rule, but in doing so it had chained millions to a new kind of pain. The miracle drug had become a curse, and the question that haunted doctors as the 19th century ended was simple and awful. What have we done? As the 20th century began, morphine was everywhere. It sat in medicine cabinets, in doctors' bags, in hospitals. It was the gold standard all other painkillers were measured against. But it was also more seen as dangerous, not for its quick effects but for what it did over time. How it changed a patient into something else, a dependent, a habitué, a morphineist. Medical writing of the early 1900s is full of case studies. They show a troubling picture. Doctors told of patients who started morphine for real pain, got better from their injury or sickness but could not stop the drug. Their lives began to spin around, getting the next dose. They became tricky, seeing many doctors for many prescriptions, a practice later called doctor shopping. They would fake signs, steal medicine, and when all else failed, use the black market. One detailed case from a 1903 journal tells of a woman, a mother of 3, given morphine after a hard childbirth. After 3 months, her doctor tried to lower her dose. She became hysterical, saying the pain was back. The doctor, insured, not wanting his patient to suffer, kept the prescription. A year later, she was injecting morphine 5 times a day, ignoring her children, her home and her health. When her husband finally cut her money to buy the drug, she tried suicide. The doctor writing the study admitted with clear pain he did not know how to help her. The medical field was in a terrible bind. Morphine was needed. Nothing else could touch severe pain as well, but using it, especially over time, carried huge risk of creating need. Doctors needed it, but they also feared it. Some began to refuse to prescribe it at all, even to patients in real agony, because they did not want the blame for making an addict. Others gave it freely from pity, or because they still did not fully believe addiction was real, thinking it a moral flaw, not a medical state. This time also saw a new kind of doctor, the addiction specialist. Private sanatoriums and clinics opened, promising to cure morphine addiction with various treatments. Some were real tries at medical care, using slow lowering of the drug with support. Others were total frauds, promising miracle cures with odd treatments. Electric shocks, cold water, baths, laxatives, and in some cases, just swapping morphine for another drug, often cocaine, making to addictions. One famous case was the Keeley cure sold by Dr. Leslie Keeley in the 1880s, staying popular into the 1920s. Keeley claimed his treatment had a 95% success rate. He franchised his clinics across the United States and treated thousands. The core of his treatment was an injection of his special formula, called double chloride of gold. He said it fixed a chemical imbalance in the body that caused addiction. Patients got a course of shots over weeks while at the clinic. Many said they felt cured. The truth was more complex. Chemical tests later showed Keely's double chloride of gold had almost no gold. It was mostly water, alcohol and plant extracts. Some versions had small amounts of strychnine and atropine, strong drugs with effect, but no proof they helped addiction. While the Keely Institutes did give was structure, removal from the patient's usual place, supportive care and social push from other patients. In short, it was an early form of live-in rehab. The cure was not the shot, but the setting and the help. And the relapse rate, while never honestly shared, was surely much higher than 95%. The money reason for morphine was strong on all sides. Drug companies made huge profits from making it. Doctors prescribing it had patients who were loyal, almost desperately so. Pharmacists knew a customer hooked on morphine was a customer for life. This made a system where money interest fought change, even as human costs grew. There were good doctors who saw the problem and tried to fix it. Some made rules for careful prescribing, using the lowest helpful dose for the shortest time. Others pushed for honest talks with patients about risks. But these voices were few. And the main feeling stayed that morphine was a needed evil. That its good for sudden pain beat the risks. And that addiction was mostly a problem of weak people, not a sure result of the drug's nature. Things got more tangled by the lack of rules. In the United States, no federal laws controlled narcotic prescription or sale. Each state had its own patch of rules, if any. In many places, morphine could be bought from a pharmacy without a prescription if the pharmacist would sell it. The system was ready for abuse at every level. This changed with the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914. On top, it was just a tax law. It said anyone who imported, made, sold, or gave out opiate or coca products must register and pay a tax. But the law's words had a key line. Doctors could prescribe these drugs only in the course of his professional practice only. The question became, what was real professional practice? Could a doctor prescribe morphine to keep an addict stable and working? Or was that just feeding the addiction, serving a vice, not treating a sickness? The Treasury Department enforcing the law took a hard view. They decided giving narcotics just to keep addiction was not real medical practice. It was a crime. The results were fast and harsh. Thousands of doctors were looked into, arrested and charged. Some went to jail. The medical world, scared of legal trouble, mostly left addicted patients. Maintenance clinics running legally where patients could get clean, measured morphine doses to stay stable were closed. The Supreme Court, in rulings through the 19s and 1920s, backed the government's view. The effect was to make addiction a crime. Patients who had been under medical care getting pure morphine were suddenly cut off. They were sick, desperate, and now called criminals. The only choice left was the black market. And the black market was ready. The Harrison Act did not stop morphine use. It just moved it from pharmacy to street. And in doing so, it made one of the richest crime businesses in American history. The rules of banning a substance with high demand are always similar. When you ban something many want, you make a market chance for those willing to break the law. Profits are huge because risks are high. Violence becomes a business tool. Corruption becomes needed and the product itself gets more dangerous. Before the Harrison Act, an addicted person could buy pure morphine of known strength legally. The drug was cheap because it was legal. After the Harrison Act, that same person bought from a criminal seller. The morphine might be pure or cut with anything, milk, sugar, quinine, starch, or worse. The price shot up not from making cost, but from the risk price sellers wanted and middlemen layers. A habit costing a few dollars a week became one costing hundreds. The addict, now a criminal by law, often had to turn to crime for money. Small theft, prostitution, and robbery became normal ways to get cash for the next dose. The cycle fed itself and was destroying. The more society made addiction a crime, the deeper addicts went into the underworld. And the more their acts seemed to prove the idea of the addict as a moral failure, not a sick person. Sources of illegal morphine varied. Some was taken from real drug supplies through corrupt doctors, pharmacists, or health workers. Some was smuggled from outside, especially Europe and Asia where rules differed. And more it was made in secret labs. The chemistry of making morphine was known and not too hard for someone trained. What was hard was getting raw opium or poppy straw to start. But crime networks proved good at this. By the 1920s and 30s, organized crime in America controlled the narcotics trade. The same groups running illegal liquor during Prohibition also ran morphine, heroin, and cocaine. Italian-American mafia families in New York, Chicago, and other big cities were main sellers. They had the networks, the muscle, and political links to work with little trouble. Police were bribed, politicians looked away, and, when needed, violence removed rivals or collected debts. The look of the morphine user began to change then. While middle-class addiction stayed often hidden, the seen face of morphine and heroin addiction tied to city poverty and pushed out groups. In cities, the drug was sold in certain areas often, where new immigrants lived, or black Americans who moved from the South. This was not by chance. These communities were over-policed and underserved, easier targets for enforcement, while top traffickers stayed mostly untouched. The media then shaped public view a lot. Newspapers ran wild stories about dope fiends and drug-crazed Negroes, often with racist hints that drug use led to violence and sexual wrongs. Films like Reefer Madness about marijuana set a tone of wider drug fear. While the story was about narcotics dangers, the hidden message was often about controlling and shaming already pushed out groups. This moral panic made political push for harder punishments. The focus was all on punishment and cutting supply, with almost no look at treatment or the root causes of addiction. The addicted person was not seen as needing help, but as a criminal needing jail. And jails they were. Prisons began filling with people whose main crime was using or having drugs. The legal system, overloaded and not set to handle addiction as a health issue, became a revolving door. Addicts would be arrested, serve time, be out, and in days or weeks be arrested again. Nothing changed except they now had a crime record, making return to society even harder. Globally, things were even more complex. The League of Nations and later the United Nations tried to make world deals to control narcotics. The goal was to limit making and moving morphine, heroin, and cocaine to real medical use only. But enforcement was spotty and loopholes were many. Some countries refused to sign, others signed but did little to enforce. And demand in the West kept production going somewhere. The Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia, Burma, Laos, and Thailand, became a major source of raw opium, much turned into morphine base and shipped out for final making into heroin. French colonial powers in Indochina were involved, sometimes active in the trade, seeing it as money. After World War II, things got more tangled as Cold War politics led Western spy groups, especially the CIA, to make deals with drug trafficking warlords for their help against communist forces. The morphine and heroin trade became part of world politics. The Kuomintang in Burma, the Corsican groups in Marseille, the Sicilian mafia in Italy, all dealt in narcotics and all at times got protection or help from Western governments, who saw them as useful friends in the bigger fight against communism. The war on drugs lived next to a practical willingness to allow the drug trade when it helped strategy. The double standard was deep and results were seen in ruined lives. By mid-century, morphine itself was mostly replaced by heroin in the illegal market. Heroin was stronger, easier to move, and gave a bigger high. But morphine never left. It stayed in hospitals. It stayed in the black market. And it stayed in the bodies and minds of those hooked on it decades before and never found a way out. The soldiers who came back from the Civil War hooked on morphine, though still alive in the 1950s and 60s, were old men who spent their whole adult lives in the drug's grip. They were living monuments to a medical era, to the pride of thinking we could master pain without cost. While the street trade in morphine and heroin got headlines and drove policy. A quieter, but just as big fight happened inside hospitals and medical schools. The question was simple. How do you balance the clear need for good pain relief with the real risk of making addiction? Through the mid-decades of the 20th century, medical teaching told doctors to be very careful with opioids. The main idea was morphine should be for final cancer patients and for sudden severe pain that would end fast. For long-term pain, arthritis, back injuries, fibromyalgia, doctors were taught to use other ways. Physical therapy, aspirin under the anti-inflammatory drugs, cortisone shots, and when needed surgery. This careful way came from real worry. The medical field had seen morphine addiction's ruin, had watched how easy a patient could slide from medical use to need. The rule of first, do no harm argued for holding back. If there was any choice besides morphine, that choice should be used. But this way had a dark side. It meant many patients in real disabling pain got too little help. Cancer patients in final illness were sometimes left to suffer needlessly, because their doctors feared making them addicts, even though addiction means nothing for someone dying in 6 months. Patients after surgery got too little pain relief from a knee-jerk fear of opioids. The swing had gone from the easy overprescribing of the 19th century to a sometimes cruel underprescribing in the 20th. In the 1960s and 70s, a movement started inside palliative care to change this. Leaders in the field, especially Drive Cicely Saunders in England, who began the modern hospice movement, argued strongly that pain relief should be a basic human right, especially for the dying. She and others showed when morphine was given regularly in good doses, with the aim of stopping pain before it starts, not just reacting, patients could live their last days with dignity and comfort. The risk of addiction meant nothing against the fact of unbearable pain. The idea of the pain ladder, made by the World Health Organization in the 1980s, gave a plan for managing cancer pain. It started with non-opioid drugs like aspirin for mild pain, moved to weak opioids like codeine for medium pain, and kept strong opioids like morphine for severe pain. It was a smart kind approach that saw pain as a serious medical problem needing serious care. This shift was a fix, a needed change. But like many fixes, it held the start of a new problem inside. The swing was starting to go back, and drug firms watched closely. They saw a chance not just to help patients, but to make huge profits. And they were ready to lie to use that chance. The breakthrough of what was sold as one came with slow release, opioid forms. The idea was clever. If you could make a pill that let out morphine slowly over many hours, you could give steady pain relief without the ups and downs that led to highs and dose raises. It would be morphine made safe by smart drug engineering. Products like an S-Cont and morphine sulfate continuous release came to market in the 1980s for severe long-term pain, especially in cancer patients. They were really useful. A patient could take a pill twice a day instead of every few hours. It made life better, but the selling began to pass the truth. Drug firms started to hint these slow-release forms were somehow basically different from regular morphine, that they had a lower addiction risk. This was the start of a dangerous lie that would peak with OxyContin in the 1990s, but the base was being laid in the morphine market. Sales reps would visit doctors showing graphs that slow-release forms made smooth blood levels without high spikes. They would quote studies, often paid by the firms themselves, saying addiction rate under 1%. They would reframe long-term pain as an undetected epidemic, and place long-acting opioids as the answer. Some doctors doubted. They saw any opioid, no matter how delivered it was. They noted patients could easily break the slow release by crushing pills, letting all morphine out at once. But other doctors, truly wanting to help patients, and calmed by seeming solid data, began to give these drugs more freely and for longer times. Pain clinics spread. Some were real practices run by doctors truly trying to help people with bad conditions. Others were barely hidden pill mills. Clinics were a quick check, got a prescription for high opioid doses, Patients would line up take cash and walk out with bottles of pills. They would use themselves or sell on the street. The line between medicine and drug dealing got fuzzy. Rural groups were slow to act. The Drug Enforcement Administration focused mainly on illegal drugs like heroin and cocaine. The FDA approved new opioid meds based on short-term use studies, with little data on what happened with months or years of use. State medical boards were understaffed and overwhelmed. The few doctors hugely overprescribing could go on for years before any result. Inside hospitals, morphine stayed the standard for sudden pain care. It was given after surgeries for heart attacks for trauma. But even here the old caution was fading. Nursing students and new doctors ought to be strong with pain care, to see untreated pain as a failure. The Joint Commission, a big hospital approval group, set rules in the late 1990s needing hospitals to check pain often and treat it well. Pain became the fifth vital sign as key as temperature or blood pressure. This was shown as kind patient-focused care, and in many cases it was. But it also made push to prescribe, push to raise doses, push to switch to stronger drugs. The system culture was moving from opioid caution to opioid freedom. And morphine, the first opioid, the grandfather of all, stayed at its center. Trusted, known and deadly. To see how morphine makes addiction, we must go into the human brain's landscape. They trip into tiny spaces where molecules lock onto receivers, where electric signs flow through neural networks, and where the basic chemistry of joy, pain and want is written. The human nerve system handles pain through a smart, old method. When tissues hurt, when you cut a finger or break a bone, special nerve ends called nociceptors sense the damage. They make electric signs that go up the spine to the brain. In the brain, these signs are handled, read and felt as pain. This system is key for survival. Pain is the body's alarm warning of danger, making us protect the hurt area as it heals. But the brain also has a natural way to lower pain. It makes its own opioids, chemicals named endorphins and amphetamines. These come out during stress, during exercise, and as a reply to pain itself. They bind to specific receivers in the brain and spine, mood, L and kappa, opioid receivers. And when they do, they cut pain sign movement. They turn down the volume on hurt. This is why soldiers sometimes do not feel wounds in battle heat, why athletes can push through pain, why the body can take more than we think. We have natural painkillers built into our biology. Morphine works because it is a chemical key fitting perfectly into the mu opioid receiver. The same lock our natural endorphins open. When morphine binds to these receivers, it copies and boosts the body's natural pain relief. It blocks pain sign movement with great skill, but it does something else too. These opioid receivers are not just in pain paths. They are all through the brain, including areas controlling mood, breathing, digestion, and most key in the reward wiring. The brain's reward system centers in a zone named the ventral tegment alaria, and its links to the nucleus accumbens. This is the loop that strengthens acts needed for survival: eating, drinking, sex. When you do something helping your survival or reproduction, this system lets out a neurotransmitter named dopamine. And dopamine feels good. It makes pleasure, happiness, want to do the thing again. It's how evolution makes sure we look for what we need. Morphine hijacks this system. When it binds to opioid receivers in the reward path, it causes a huge release of dopamine, far more than any natural reward could make. The result is euphoria, a sense of deep well-being, of everything being perfectly, blissfully fine. For someone in physical or emotional pain, this feeling is not just nice. It is revolutionary. It is the answer to a question they did not know how to ask. But here is where the trap is set. The brain is not a still organ. It adapts. When hit by a flood of outside opioids, the brain starts to adjust. It cuts, making its own natural endorphins. Why make them when morphine gives the same sign but stronger? It also cuts the number of opioid receivers, a process named Giuliet, trying to fix balance. Cells reacting to dopamine get less sensitive. The system tries to reach homeostasis, to return to normal. This is tolerance. After days or weeks of regular morphine, use the same dose no longer gives the same effect. The user needs more to get the pain relief or high they first had. This is a body adaptation, not a moral fault. But the truly sneaky part is what happens when morphine stops. The brain, having adjusted to the drug's constant presence, is now off balance. There are fewer endorphins, fewer receivers, and changed dopamine signaling. The body goes into a state of deep distress. This is withdrawal. Opioid withdrawal is not usually deadly like alcohol withdrawal can be, but it is deeply unpleasant. Signs start within hours of the last dose. First comes worry and restlessness, then body signs flow. Muscle aches, sweating goosens, where the term cold turkey comes from. The skin looks like a plucked bird's. Tears, runny nose. As hours become days, signs strengthen. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps, sleeplessness, fast heartbeat, high blood pressure. The person feels the worst flu ever mixed with huge worry and sadness. They know one thing would stop it all at once: more morphine. This is physical made. It is separate from addiction, though the two are often mixed. Like a patient taking morphine for months will get physically needy, will feel withdrawal if the drug stops suddenly, but is not addicted. Addiction has a mind part: compulsive drug seeking despite harm, loss of control over use, keeping use despite wanting to stop. The mind part of addiction involves learning and memory. Each time morphine is used, the brain links the context, the place, the people, the prep ritual with the strong reward. These links become deeply set. A person trying to stay clean might walk past the corner where they bought drugs and feel a huge craving sparked by memory and place. This is why addiction is so hard to beat. It's not just willpower. It's fighting brain paths etched deep into the brain structure. There is also proof long opioid use can cause lasting changes to brain structure and work. Crime at a volume drops in some areas. The prefrontal cortex, in charge of choice and impulse control, shows changed activity. These changes can last months or years after someone stops, making the person open to relapse even when they truly want to stay clean. Not everyone using morphine gets addicted. There is big personal difference, likely from genes, early life events, mental health, and social setting. Some can use opioids for pain, care, and stop without trouble. Others get addicted after fairly short contact. This unpredictability is part of what makes the drug so risky. You cannot know ahead who will be weak. The science also shows why medicine helped treatment works. Drugs like methadone and buprenorphine are long-acting opioids. They fill the mu receivers without making a strong high. They stop withdrawal and cut cravings, letting the brain heal and the person rebuild life. They do not remove the need. The person is still needy on an opioid, but they give stability. And stability is often the first step to recovery. Knowing the brain science does not lower the moral duty of those who sell and prescribe these drugs recklessly. If anything, it makes their acts more blameworthy. They knew or should have known what morphine and its can do to the human brain. They knew addiction's mechanics and they chose profit over safety. They chose to lie. By the start of the 21st century, morphine had many synthetic and semi-scientific relatives. Codeine, hydrodocan, oxycodone, hydromorphinoxy, morphine, fentanyl. The opioid family had grown, but morphine stayed the standard, the reference point, and it stayed key in hospitals worldwide, the spine of sudden pain care and palliative care. But in the United States, something had gone very wrong. The drug industry, led by firms like Purdue Pharma, with strong selling of OxyContin, had successfully told a generation of doctors opioids were safe for long-term pain, that addiction was rare, that the real issue was undertreated pain. Prescription opioid use blew up through the 1990s and 2000s. The results were predictable and destroying. Millions of Americans got needy on prescription opioids. When doctors finally began to cut prescribing from conscience or rule push, patients kept on these drugs for years found themselves cut off. The physical need did not care why the cutoff happened. Their bodies screamed for opioids. And when pills became hard to get or too costly, they turned to the street. Heroin, once fairly uncommon in many parts of America, surged. But even heroin was not enough to meet demand, or give the profits traffickers wanted, and so came fentanyl and its copies, synthetic opioids so strong they could be moved in small amounts, and cut into heroin or pressed into fake pills with huge profit. The death count rose year after year. In 1999 there were about 4,000 opioid overdose deaths in the United States. By 2017 the number passed 47,000. By 2021 over 70,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, most involving opioids. To see this in view, more Americans have died from drug overdoses in the past 20 years than died in all of World War I, World War II, the Korean War and the Vietnam War together. This is not a failure of personal willpower or moral character. This is a system failure of rules of company ethics, of medical teaching, of public health, setup and of drug policy. The prescription opioid epidemic was made by the drug industry through planned lying and allowed by rule capture. The fentanyl epidemic is kept by ban policies that ensure the drug supply is unregulated, unsure and deadly. Morphine itself in pure drug form is rarely involved in these street overdoses. The street has moved to stronger, more profitable drugs. But morphine is still there in hospitals and palliative care, in the medicine cabinets of cancer patients, and it still carries risk. Patients given morphine after surgery sometimes find they like it a bit too much. The warm floating feeling becomes something they want. When the prescription ends, some look for more doctor shopping, or finally turning to illegal sources. The medical world has been forced into a painful rethink. The swing is going back again, away from free prescribing toward more caution. New guides from the CDC and other groups stress opioids should be a last choice for long-term pain, used at the lowest helpful dose for the shortest time. Doctors must now check prescription drug watch databases to see if patients get opioids from many sources. Some states have set limits on length and dose of first opioid prescription. These steps are needed, but they come with a cost. Patients with real severe pain sometimes find it hard to get enough care. Cancer patients and those with final sickness sometimes face doubting doctors or pharmacists, afraid to prescribe or give enough morphine. The fear of making addiction or of raw results can lead to needless pain. The challenge is finding the balance, giving enough pain relief while lowering addiction risk and stopping move to the black market. In palliative care and hospice, morphine stays key. For a dying patient, worries about long-term addiction mean nothing. What matters is comfort and dignity. Morphine, given right, can let a person spend final days free from terrible pain, able to talk with loved ones, able to find some peace. Here morphine is still the miracle it was meant to be. But even here there are issues. Families sometimes fight enough pain, medicine fearing it will speed death. I worry, both understandable and mostly untrue. Right dose morphine eases pain without much shortening life. But the shame around opioids is so strong some families prefer seeing loved ones hurt than risk what they see as drug addiction or mercy killing. Health workers must handle these fears with care and teaching. The opioid epidemic has also shown the deep lack in America's way with addiction treatment. Despite years of proof, addiction is a health condition treatment stays hard to get. Insurance cover is limited. There are far too few addiction specialists. Medicine help treatment, the best way for opioid addiction, is still seen with doubt by many in recovery backing full stop. Shame stays the top block. Let us now focus on the present day. What is happening with morphine now? Its role has changed again. Now it sits in a strange place. It is both a villain and a hero, depending on who you ask. In emergency rooms across the world, morphine is still the first choice for severe pain. A patient arrives with a shattered leg from a car crash. The nurse prepares a syringe. Within minutes the agony fades. The patient can breathe again. This is morphine doing what it does best, taking the edge off unbearable suffering. In the same hospital, in another ward, a different story unfolds. A patient is recovering from surgery. They are given morphine through a pump. They press a button when the pain rises. This is patient-controlled analgesia. It puts power in the hands of the sufferer. But here too lies risk. Some patients press the button more often than needed, not just for pain, but for the warm blanket feeling it brings. The nurse watches the data. She sees the dose climbing. She must decide, is this pain or the beginning of craving? This is the daily tightrope walk of modern medicine. Outside the hospital walls, the story grows darker. In the streets, morphine has a new rival. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 100 times stronger than morphine. It is cheap to make and easy to smuggle. Dealers mix it with heroin or press it into fake pills. Users often do not know what they are taking. A dose meant for heroin is a death sentence with fentanyl. Overdose deaths skyrocket. But here is a cruel twist. Naloxone overdose reversal drug works on morphine and fentanyl too. It knocks the opioid off the brain receptors, restoring breathing within minutes. Communities now train ordinary people to use naloxone. It is given out at pharmacies, no questions asked. A mother keeps it in her purse in case her son relapses. A librarian carries it in her bag. A police officer administers it on the sidewalk. This is harm reduction in action, saving lives without judgment. Morphine started this chain of events, but the solution now is bigger than any one drug. In the research lab, scientists are looking for answers. Can we make a painkiller that works without addiction? Some are studying the brains of people who used opioids but never got addicted, looking for genetic clues. Others are designing new molecules, trying to keep the pain relief while blocking the euphoria. Progress is slow. The brain is a complex puzzle, but there is hope. One avenue is vaccine development, a vaccine that teaches the immune system to attack opioids. If the drug cannot reach the brain, it cannot cause high or addiction, but it also cannot relieve pain. So this is only for those already addicted, to help them stay clean. Another idea is better delivery systems, a patch that releases pain relief only at the site of injury, not throughout the brain, or a pill that breaks down slowly, preventing a sudden rush. The goal is clear. Keep the medical benefits, lose the danger. What about the people already addicted? The ones who started with a prescription and lost control. For them, medication-assisted treatment remains the gold standard. Methadone and buprenorphine are themselves opioids, but they are long-acting, unstable. They stop withdrawal, cut cravings, and allow a normal life. A patient on methadone can work doctor care for family. They are not high, they are simply not sick. But stigma follows them. Many see this as swapping one drug for another. They face judgment at work from family, even from doctors. This stigma is a barrier to treatment. People avoid help because they fear the label. Yet study after study shows this treatment works. It cuts overdose death by half. It keeps people in therapy. It reduces crime and disease spread. It is the closest thing we have to a solution. In some countries the approach is different. Switzerland, Germany, Canada. They offer safe consumption sites, places where people can use drugs under medical supervision, with clean equipment and no fear of arrest. If they overdose, staff are there to revive them. These sites also offer counseling, health care and shelter. They meet people where they are. The results are striking. Overdose deaths drop in these areas. HIV and hepatitis infections fall. More people enter treatment because they have built trust with a nurse or counselor. It is not enabling. It is engaging. It is saying your life has value even now. Morphine and its cousins caused this crisis, but punishment will not end it. Only compassion and science will. Back in the poppy fields, the cycle continued. Farmers in Afghanistan, Mexico, Myanmar grow poppies because it pays better than wheat or corn. They are not villains. They are poorer people feeding families. The opium is processed into heroin, shipped across borders. The profits fund insurgencies and cartels. Violence follows the trade. But if demand dries up, the trade will too. So the focus must be on reducing demand. Through treatment, through education, through better pain care. What does the future hold? Perhaps one day We will look back at morphine as a stepping stone, a necessary but dangerous tool in our fight against pain. We will have smarter drugs and better system. We will understand addiction as a disease, not a choice. We will treat it with the same urgency as diabetes or heart disease. But we are not there yet. Today morphine is still with us. In the syringe, in the pill, in the patch, in the bodies and minds of millions. Its story is a warning and a lesson, a reminder of our capacity for both healing and harm. The joy plant still blooms. Its promise and its peril remain. Our task is to wield its power with wisdom, to relieve suffering without creating new forms of it, to look with clear eyes at both the light and the shadow it casts. The history continues, and we are all writing it, with every choice, every policy, every act of kindness. The end is not yet written, and that is perhaps the most hopeful thing of all. Let us look closer at a time of great change, the early 20th century, when everything shifted. This was the era when morphine moved from medicine to menace in the public mind. It began with good intentions. The Harrison Act was meant to control, not to punish. But enforcement turned it into a weapon. Doctors who had prescribed morphine for years found themselves under suspicion. A physician in Chicago, Harold Myers, had a practice full of chronic pain patients. Many were elderly women with arthritis or work injuries. He gave them morphine tablets to make their lives bearable. When the new law came, he tried to comply. He cut doses, refused new prescriptions, kept careful records. But his patients suffered. They came to his office weeping, begging for relief. He faced an impossible choice: break the law and risk prison, or watch his patients suffer. He chose his patients. For 2 more years he wrote prescriptions, knowing he was being watched. Then one morning federal agents arrived at his door. They took his ledgers, his prescription pads, and his medical license. He stood trial as a drug dealer. The newspapers called him a dope doctor. His patients, many of them respectable mothers and grandmothers, were old addicts in court. He was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years in prison. His story was not unique. Across America, thousands of doctors faced the same dilemma. The medical profession retreated. Fear replaced compassion. Patients who needed pain relief could not get it. Patients who were addicted were abandoned. This created a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Where legal medicine stepped away, the illegal market stepped in. The black market of the 1920s was a shadow system. It operated in alleyways, in speakeasies, in rented rooms. The morphine sold, he was different. He was often uncut with other substances to increase profit. Baking sugar, talcum powder, quinine, sometimes even poison. The user never knew the strength. Overdoses became common, but the demand was insatiable. The profile of the user changed too. No longer just the middle-class housewife. Now it was the jazz musician, the factory worker, the unemployed veteran. Addiction spread through poor neighborhoods where hope was scarce. Police raids were frequent, but they only scratched the surface. For every street dealer arrested, 2 more took his place. The profits were too high. Organized crime saw the opportunity. They systematized the trade. They had supply chains from Europe and Asia. They had distribution networks across the country. They corrupted police and politicians. The morphine trade became a business, a deadly efficient one. In the midst of this, a cultural battle was fought. The image of the morphine addict was used to scare the public. Posters showed men and women with sunken eyes and ragged clothes, their lives ruined by the demon drug. Moral reformers preached that addiction was a sin, that users were weak-willed degenerates. This narrative ignored the truth. Many addicts were victims of medical practice, or people self-medicating untreated mental pain. But the stereotype stuck. It shaped laws and policies for a century. It made addiction a moral failing, not a health issue. This delayed effective treatment for generations. Yet even in this dark time, there were voices of reason. Some doctors and researchers argued for a medical approach. They established a few clinics where addicts could receive maintenance doses. Clean, measured morphine in a clinical setting. These experiments showed promise. Patients stabilized their lives, improved, crime rates dropped. But the political wind was against them. The clinics were shut down one by one. The idea of maintenance treatment was buried. It would not re-emerge for another 50 years. The story of morphine in this period is a story of unintended consequences. A law meant to solve a problem made it worse. Medicine withdrew and suffering increased. Criminal enterprises flourished. And a stereotype was born that haunts us to this day. We see here a pattern that repeats throughout history. Fear and prohibition often backfire. They doctor problems underground where they fester and grow. The answer to a complex issue is rarely simple, but understanding this history helps us avoid the same mistakes. Morphine itself was not the villain. It was how we responded to it that caused so much harm. This lesson is crucial as we face today's opioid crisis. Will we choose fear, or will we choose science? Will we choose punishment, or will we choose compassion? The past offers a clear warning. We must listen.